Hey guys, how's it going? It's Andy from Magoo Investing. Happy Friday. Today we're going to be wrapping up the week talking about the social media stocks. So far this week we've talked about Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and if you missed that you can all go to my channel and watch those videos. But today I wanted to talk about the last social media stock that I think is important to talk about. Today we're going to be talking about Pinterest, ticker symbol PINS. So when I started this week I was like, oh, this is a social media stock. But the more research I've done about it, it seems like it gets incorrectly kind of clumped in with the snaps, Twitter, and Facebook. It seems more of a search engine with a little bit of a social aspect to it, but it seems to be mainly about the search engine. So I'm going to be talking about Pinterest, how it works, considering that 95% of the people that watch my videos are guys, and when we talk about the user data that uses Pinterest, yeah, it's like 80% female. So there's a good chance that most of my people watching these videos do not use Pinterest actively. But today I'm going to be making the case for why I think Pinterest might be one of the most underappreciated stocks out there. And I'm going to talk about the recent news that has pushed it up significantly. And then I'm going to finish the video, since this is the end of the week. I want to talk about how I would rank the 4 social media stocks that I've talked about from the videos this week. So I'm going to be talking about which ones I think are the best opportunities, which ones are the safest ones, and just kind of ranking them to give my own opinion. In case you didn't watch all the videos this week, you can get my kind of detailed description. Also, I'm going to be putting timestamps back on these videos, so if you want to go down to the description, you can kind of skip ahead to the parts that you want to hear. So before we get started, I do have to say that I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. Anything you hear in this video is just me giving my own opinions on the stock market, and you need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. Also, if you've been enjoying these videos, I really appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button, as it would help my channel grow. With that out of the way, let's get started and talk about Pinterest, ticker symbol PINS. Okay, so Pinterest has been killing it recently. So the stock IPO'd in around April of 2019, and since then it's gone through a couple different phases. When I go onto the charts in a little bit, I'll show you there was a very steep downtrend for a while. It has broken out of that, and then with the recent news this week, after Snapchat had their incredible earnings, which gave a lot of momentum to all of these social media stocks out there, it has recently broken out of the upward trend that it was in. So that's very bullish overall. And then they had 2 upgrades this week from financial banks. Bank of America Global Research specifically upgraded them to a buy and moved their price target from 45 to 58. So that's a pretty significant jump. When we look at the current price, it's currently at $51. All right, so let's hop on over to the charts, and I'm going to talk about what I see there and how I would consider trading this going forward. So here we are looking at the Pinterest chart. As you can see, it's kind of all over the place. You have a couple pretty big gap ups and gap downs. You have a gap up, gap down, gap up, and then it immediately slid right after that, gap up, and another gap up. So this is a stock that seems to be doing that a lot. And so here is the blank chart, just so you can see what it looks like before I put what I personally see on the chart. Compared to something like Facebook, I'll show that chart that I talked about on Wednesday. It's had a super nice upward channel that I was a huge fan of it. And so when we come to Pinterest today, ticker symbol PINS, and I go back to my drawing, there's kind of a lot to put in here. So I first charted off the top that had a tough time being broken after the IPO. So it pushed up and then immediately sold off, came up here, tried again, gapped up right to that level, and kind of hung around it for a while. So this is a pretty important area, so I'm just going to put that in as an alert. But since then, the stock was in a downward channel for a while, not the most respected downward channel I've ever seen, but still pretty nice. And then it switched to an upward channel. And with the news from this week of Snapchat beating earnings and having the fantastic ad revenue, the whole sector has been up for a majority of the week. And so as a result, Pinterest has broken out of this upward channel. I'll extend this to the right. And so breakout is usually very bullish. For someone like myself that trades primarily based off of technical analysis, not a great situation for me. Right now, I would call this a speculative stock based off of the fact that it is out of any trend that I was potentially going to be playing. The trend is your friend. And in this situation, it's definitely feeling bullish based off of it breaking out to the upside on higher than expected volume. We saw that jump on Wednesday, which is why it gapped up. So there's a lot of positives going with Pinterest, but my problem is for a technical trader, I don't see a lot to go off of. It feels very speculative on the idea that it's going up because of good news and good earnings, but I don't have a price target. I talked about Bank of America raised its price target to $58, but based off the charts, that's very I don't know, it just seems like a random number. There's no real reason behind it. So at this point, I'm going to be sticking on the sidelines and not taking a position in Pinterest. One, because I don't fully understand the business and it's not something that I use on a day-to-day basis. And two, based off the charts, I don't see anything here that tells me to specifically take a position right now. I'll go back to Facebook. We have this fantastic trend right here. And if it comes back down to this level, I will happily take a position because there is a trend that I would be playing, and I would feel a lot more confident going into the end of the year, the election, based off of trading a trend that is very set in stone. When you go back to Pinterest, it's out of that trend. A breakout to the upside is fantastic. If I was in a long-term position for Pinterest, I'd feel very good about it right now. But since I'm not currently a shareholder, I don't see a great opportunity to get in. So similar to what I've been talking about mainly this week is, since we kind of missed out on a great opportunity before this news came out, I'm going to be waiting. I'm hoping that the earnings report that comes out by the end of the month might push it back down into this channel, and then I'll take a look at it. But right now, Pinterest is not something that is really catching my eye. I'm very happy that it broke out to the upside because this is a company that I think is pretty solid overall. But based off the charts, I don't see anything super attractive that would warrant me taking a position right now. Okay, so Pinterest is very different than the rest of the social media stocks out there. They do rely heavily on a lot of their ad revenue, but from what I've seen, it's very more directed and is rewarding companies that increase interactions and less about just people seeing the actual content. So they've had some deals. 2015, Pinterest had a deal with Apple that made it so you can download apps directly through their interface. So far this year, they've partnered with Adobe for the Pinterest Partner Program to optimize targeting and shopping tools for businesses to try to maximize the amount of money that they can make from the platform. And then back in May, the company partnered with Shopify to improve sales. So the company has been partnering with a lot of these major giants in e-commerce to kind of change the way that they're making money. Instead of something like a Twitter where it's mainly advertisers are paying for people to see their platform and to see their posts that they're putting out there, for Pinterest, it's mainly about trying to promote e-commerce and people to actually buy stuff. So I think Pinterest, it is a social media stock, but I think it's more of a search engine that promotes e-commerce more than it is just an actual social media site. So some stats about the platform. In the last quarter, they had 416 million monthly average users, which is a 40% increase year over year. So compared to some of the other platforms we talked about this week, obviously not as large as something like a Facebook, but I believe it is larger than Snapchat just barely. And I can't remember what the numbers were for Twitter, but I think it's higher than that. 71% of their users are female, and those female users account for 93% of the total pins that you see on Pinterest. So the female demographic is very strong here. And that is kind of transformed the business from more of just being a lot about projects, and now it's a lot about businesses are partnering with Pinterest to try to promote their products, and it seems to be going relatively well. From the numbers that I could find, 83% of people that use Pinterest weekly have made a purchase from content that they've seen on the site, which is a number that I was pretty surprised about. That's pretty high. And then 9 out of 10 users have described the platform as being filled with positivity. And so I've talked to some friends that use a lot of the social media platforms, and they say that they really enjoy Pinterest because there's no politics. It's mainly just the content you really want to see. And so Twitter, you can definitely go through your feed and kind of curate it in a way you want. But for the most part, Pinterest is filled with positivity, and it seems like people really enjoy that it's very disconnected from the rest of the social media platforms where there's a lot of hate and negativity. Going to their platform, the number that I usually look at, so I usually look at the user data for the monthly average users, and that's very impressive with that 40% increase. But for the average revenue per user, which is a pretty important statistic to see how efficient the company is at bringing in money per user, it's very low. It's 70 cents per user. So not great. It's down 21% year over year from that last quarter. That's mainly from the problems of the pandemic, where a lot of these businesses, since they're less going about just people seeing their content and it's a lot about trying to promote traffic to external sites, it makes a lot of sense that maybe people aren't interacting with that as much, and businesses are also not trying to spend as much. So I think it's kind of a double whammy there. Instead of, for the other sites, we've seen an increase in user base during the pandemic. So the users are there, but it's the advertisers that have been kind of reeling it back. And I think on Pinterest, it's a mix of the average consumer probably was not spending as much, and the advertisers were not willing to spend as much either. So it will be very interesting to see what happens with their earnings report at the end of this month to see if that bounces back like the rest of the social media stocks. So looking at their books, their revenue has seemed to level off a little bit. The past 2 quarters, they both saw a revenue of $272 million. In that last quarter, that was only a 4.2% increase year over year. So this definitely comes from the pandemic, and I'm not going to make any judgments based off of that. You still had positive growth year over year, but it'll be very curious to see what happens with this next quarter to see if it can continue the growth or if it's going to stay on this kind of lower trajectory that we've seen with 2 consecutive quarters at $272 million. The company is not profitable yet, and they've only had 1 quarter of positive net income, which was Q4 of 2018, right before it IPO'd. So similar to a lot of these tech companies, the social media stocks, not positive at this point yet. So going to be watching that going forward. Their last quarter, they had a net loss of $101 million. I'm not super worried about that, especially when you see that they have $1.7 billion in cash on hand, no long-term debt, and a shareholder equity of $1.9 billion. So I don't see any major red flags there. Something to watch going forward is based off of this incredible rise that we've seen recently, and the fact that it's broken out of this upward channel, the shorting volume has increased significantly. So when I think of the most shorted stocks recently, I think it's something like a GameStop. And so 28% of the volume traded on GameStop has been short, which is very high. Snapchat, surprisingly, is at 25%. Pinterest is at 21%. So I think it's possible that we might see a minor short squeeze. What this means is going into earnings, you have the catalyst that'll move the stock up significantly or down significantly. And if things go really well and the stock shoots up, since a lot of these people are probably betting on the stock to fall for the earnings report, for a lot of the option stuff, they might have to close out their position. And the way that shorting works is you are borrowing shares from your broker, you are selling them, and then you're hoping to buy them back to give back to your broker at a lower price. And so that buying triggers the stock price to go up because you're increasing the volume for the buying. And so if the stock goes up, a lot of people will be forced to cover their shorts at a loss and will push the stock up higher. So I'm going to be watching that going forward. Very interesting that it's at more than 20%, considering GameStop, which in my mind is probably going to be the heaviest shorted stock for a while, is only at 28%. So right now, I think that Pinterest is a solid stock. I think it's very speculative based off of the charts not being able to see any distinct trends for me to play going forward. But now I wanted to kind of rank how I feel about all the social media stocks that I've talked about this week. So I think definitely, obviously I'm not giving advice, but this is how I feel about these stocks. Facebook, definitely the safest one out there. They have an incredible amount of net income. They have billions of people using their site, and it's relatively safe. They do have that kind of crosshair coming from the Department of Justice starting the antitrust stuff, but I don't see Facebook as being as in danger as something like the Apple and the Google that we've seen recently. So I'm not really worried about that. I still think my favorite social media stock overall is probably Snapchat. Definitely a little bit overextended right now, and I don't love the current price that it's at. But if it does fall, I will happily take a position in Snap. I think the best long-term potential, I think, is Twitter. I think the user base is only going to continue to increase. I think its reliance on how people are getting their news now will continue the interactions that people have on there. We have had some interesting stuff with election stuff. Maybe the revenue will drop off after the election's over. We're going to have to watch that. But I think Twitter is probably in the best spot going forward. I think it's at a relatively reasonable price. And so I don't mind Twitter right now. Pinterest is one of those platforms that I don't feel comfortable buying right now. One, it's out of that trend, so I don't have anything to trade it based off of that. Also, I don't use the platform specifically. And that's kind of what I view as one of the most important parts of my trading philosophy. If I buy stocks that are at a discount, none of these stocks you could say are at a discount, but it's in a platform and something that I use on a regular basis because that gives you a level of confidence for a long-term play. Say you buy a company that you've never heard of before and it falls 10% in one day. You're probably not going to be as confident as if it's a company that you use on a regular basis and you trust the management to get them back on track. So Pinterest is not something that I use. Everyone that I know that has used Pinterest and it actively does use it still loves it, but it's not something that I use. Not really the user base that they're not trying to target me. They're in 71% of their users are female and 93% of their total pins come from female. So it's a lot of a site about planning out future projects, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they integrate all of these shopping options with e-commerce. We've had that recent deal with Shopify, which should increase revenue, and I'm very curious to see what happens with this next earnings report on the 28th of this month. So let me know what you thought about Pinterest overall. Do you think it's a good opportunity right now, or do you kind of feel the same way I do, that now that it's out of that upward channel, might be time to kind of wait and see what happens. So let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what you thought about my analysis this week of the social media stocks. I have not decided what type of tech stocks I'm going to be talking about next week, but I'll figure that out in the next couple of days, and I will see you for that video on Monday. Thanks for watching.